Indiana Dunes National Park can be found in northwestern Indiana, roughly an hour southeast of Chicago, sandwiched between Gary and Michigan City. It was authorized by Congress in 1966 as Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore and was redesignated in 2019 as America's 61st National Park. My brother and I had the chance to visit for the first time earlier this month, and though we only experienced a few of the park's trails, we both walked away asking the same question. Why on earth are the Indiana Dunes a national park? National Lakeshore always made sense because the park runs for 20 miles along the southern shore of Lake Michigan, and that's certainly the most impressive part in my opinion. For the longest time, we had 4 national lake shores in the National Park Service, including this one. The other 3 can also be found in the Great Lakes region and are the Apostle Islands in Wisconsin, Pictured Rocks in Michigan, and Sleeping Bear Dunes, also in Michigan. To be completely honest, all 3 of those appear to be much more spectacular than the Indiana Dunes, making me wonder why those haven't been redesignated but this one was. Of course, the main reason as to why the Indiana Dunes were redesignated resides in the level of protection offered by national park status. The first efforts to turn the Indiana Dunes into a national park date all the way back to 1916, well before it was established as a national lakeshore. Locals wanted to preserve the area from encroaching industry, and one can certainly emphasize for said locals when you visit and see power plants in all directions surrounding the park. That, in addition to large quantities of housing and businesses right outside park boundaries, make it feel less immersive and tranquil than other national parks. It's almost the complete opposite of how I felt during my last national park trip to the Dry Tortugas in Florida. This also makes for an awkward park layout where you are required to enter and exit at various points while you are also surrounded by small towns. It's for these reasons that the Indiana Dunes feel in no way, shape, or form like a national park should. I also wouldn't say the scenery is anything to shout out either. I certainly enjoyed what I saw, and Lake Michigan is very beautiful, but I've been to state parks and other NPS sites with more impressive sand dunes. Sure enough, there has to be something about the Indiana Dunes that makes them worth protecting to the highest degree. Oftentimes, after doing some research before or after a park visit, I grew to appreciate it more. After doing just that, I learned that the Indiana Dunes were the 4th most biologically diverse of all of our national parks. There are over 1,100 flowering plant species and ferns that call this place home. The park also has got a bunch of different ecosystems, some of which are kept away from the human eye. Of course, there's the sand dunes knitted together by marram grasses, which I actually thought were really pretty. There's also black oakwood savannas, wildflower and bird-rich bogs and marshes, and tranquil river forests. I mentioned that we only had a few hours at the park, so we didn't get to experience many of these ecosystems, but we did have the chance to see 2 of the most popular areas at the park, starting with Mount Baldy. Mount Baldy is one of the highest dunes at the park, standing 126 feet above the water level of Lake Michigan. It moves about 5 to 10 feet per year and will eventually cover the parking area, making it far more difficult to access. The sands move when prevailing northwest winds exceed 7 miles per hour, which, as you can imagine, is very frequent around here. To reach Mount Baldy's summit, you do have to go on a ranger-led tour, which I thought was a bit too much talking and less actually doing things. But she did say a few things that caught my attention, and one of those was that Mount Baldy will someday reach Highway 12, which works its way around the park. You can already see that the dune is coming up on these fences that they put in after some injuries had occurred where people were literally being swallowed by the dune itself. The trail the ranger takes you on is pleasant, starting in a lush green forest with lots of bird chirps. The trail out of nowhere transitions to sand, where it takes a whole lot more energy to walk along. Since the particles of sand are small granules, when you move your feet through them, the granules also move, thus providing a very weak resistive force against our feet. The initial reveal we got of Lake Michigan was impressive, and it's a gorgeous lake for sure. While visiting Mount Baldy and any of the other dunes in the park, try to avoid stepping on these grasses, as a lot of them are planted to help stabilize the dunes and keep them from moving too fast. The stark contrast of forest to sand dunes to water was very fascinating to me, and it's part of the reason I enjoyed this area so much. Up next, we'd had the chance to visit the West Beach unit of the park and hike the Dune Secession Trail. This 1.1 mile loop is traversed via an elevated boardwalk trail for the majority of the time. This was a very pleasant hike through the forest once again, and then along some of the smaller sandhills. My favorite parts were seeing the wildflower bloom and trees growing out of the dunes themselves. Going into today, my brother and I had thrown around the idea of swimming in Lake Michigan if the temperature was high enough. Unfortunately for us, it was only in the high 60s, making it something we decided to pass on. But what shocked me was at the end of the Dune Secession Trail, when it drops you off at the park's West Beach, there were so many people swimming in the water. I was tempted to ask a local if this were considered a warm day or something, because where I'm from in San Diego, California, if it's a colder day, there won't be anywhere near as many people at the beach. It was good to see so many people enjoying themselves, but there was a fair bit of trash scattered about, so if you come here, please do your part in leaving no trace, and if you really want to make a difference, pick up a few pieces of trash while you're on the trails. This way, you'll be leaving the park even better off than when you found it, which is something I strive to do whenever I see a particularly dirty section of a park. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video. Though I still agree more with the designation of a national lakeshore, I do have a better understanding as to its redesignation after doing my fair share of research. I hope for the best in the park's future and would recommend a visit if you're in the area. Until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.